All right, let's move on.
I'm going to start the recording.
All right.
Oh, Christy, you have to give me permission. Sorry.
It's not working. Oh, it's because let's see. The work?
Yeah.
Recording in progress.
Excellent. All right. Good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, October 14th, 2021, and I would like to call this meeting of the Marina Planning Commission to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. Chair Brian McCarthy,
Here.
Vice Chair David Bielsker,
Here.
Commissioner Nancy Amadeo,
Here.
Commissioner Hyun-Soo Her,
Here.
Commissioner Surinder Rana,
Yes.
Commissioner Audra Walton,
Here.
and Commissioner Glenn Woodson.
Here.
Thank you, everyone, and good evening.
Thank you. We have a quorum with all commissioners present. If you'd please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the
To the
flag
flag
of the
of the United
States,
States of America,
to the
and
republic,
to the republic
for
which
which
stands
one nation,
one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible, with
with
liberty.
liberty and justice for all.
There's got to be an easier way to do that. It always sounds so awkward with all the different voices. Thank you, everyone. Now's the time for special announcements and communications from the floor. This is a time when any member of the public can address the commission on any item that is not on the agenda. And you will have up to 4 minutes to do so. We will go out to the public first, and then we will allow commissioners the same opportunity. If you're a member of the public and you'd like to address the commission on any item not on the agenda, please raise your hand. And I'm not seeing any hands. Give it another couple seconds and we will come back to the commission and ask commissioners, do you have any items, community interest items that you'd like to discuss? Please raise your hand. And not seeing any on the commission. So we will move on to our first public hearing of the night. Item 6A is a public hearing for 330 Reservation Road, number C. It's Tico's conditional use permit for on-sale beer and wine. We're opening a public hearing, taking testimony from the public, and considering adopting a resolution approving a conditional use permit to allow on-sale beer and wine at a full-service restaurant. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Chair McCarthy. I'm Nick McElroy. I'm an associate planner with the Planning Division, and I am going to do the staff report. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see the screen okay?
Yes.
As Chair McCarthy said, this is a staff report for and a presentation for the use permit for the proposal of on-sale alcohol at Tico's restaurant at, as you said, at 330 Reservation Road, Suite C. Little background, the zoning here is C1, and the general plan is retail/service. This is within the downtown vitalization area. As you can see on the map, this is the location of Tico's in the shopping center. The request is for a type 41 license, which is incidental sale of beer and wine on premises with a bona fide kitchen. So that means it's going to be served with a substantial meal. Their hours of operation are going to be 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. daily, except Friday and Saturday, they're going to be open for dinner until 9 p.m. So this is in an area that's of undue concentration. What that basically means is there's two ways it can be an undue concentration, but the one that applies to this property, to this project and this new proposed use is the premises in a census tract where the number of on sale or off sale retail or alcohol licenses exceeds the ratio for the population based on the ABC's website and their findings. So this particular area allows for 7 on-premise and 3 off-premise, and there is currently 8 on-premise and 10 off-premise. Therefore, as I said, this is an area of undue concentration. For this staff report, as is customary for any type of alcohol application, we met with the police chief and asked if she had any concerns. And she stated that she has no concerns about public safety or increased crime, especially since this is an incidental part of restaurant operation and there's no proposed live entertainment associated with it. This is basically a map of the census tract that this project falls in. As you can see, the project site is right here, and it shows that the other surrounding census tracts, this is part of the core for businesses in Marina. So that's why there's so many ABC licenses here. And so the types of licenses in the area, all of the on-premise licenses are all type 41. So they're all beer and wine. In fact, there's actually one in the same center as this establishment. And then the off-sale are beer and wine type 20 for, basically retail. And then there's also general type 21, 5 of those. And as I stated, there's an existing type 41 license at Nakwan Korean Barbecue, which is in the center. And then as you can see, this is the site for Tico's breakfast and lunch for the proposed type 41 license. So the Planning Commission has to make some required findings to establish this new use. Basically stating that the establishment maintenance or operation of the use will not be detrimental to the health, safety, peace, and morals, comfort, and general welfare of persons residing or working in the neighborhood. Consumption on-site restaurant. So, it's going to be with the restaurant, overall improvement to dining experience. This is a courtesy that the Planning Commission has granted to other restaurants, including in the same shopping center. And as I stated previously, there's no live entertainment, so it's not going to be a huge impact. Planning Commission is also required to find that the use will not be detrimental or injurious to property and improvements in the neighborhood or the general welfare of the city. Since the use is fully within a closed building, it will not be detrimental or injurious. And also, the sale of alcohol will not cause a public nuisance. So, as I said earlier, the police chief didn't find any issues with this project for any potential public nuisance. And overall, it should improve the dining experience and be actually a public convenience. The sale of alcohol will not occur within 500 feet of a school or public assembly, and no such use exists within 500 feet of this restaurant. The sale of alcohol will not contribute to law enforcement problems. Just reiterating the same stuff at this point. Staff recommends approval, adopting a resolution approving the conditional use permit UP 2021 to allow the sale of beer and wine for consumption on site at a full service restaurant, which is Tico's Restaurant at 330 Reservation Road, Suite C, subject to conditions. And now if you guys have any questions, or I'll give it back to the chair.
Thank you, Nick. Excellent presentation. Commissioners, do we have any questions for staff on this particular report? Please raise your hand. Commissioner Amadeo has her hand up.
I just have one quick question based on your report tonight. I don't recall reading it in the staff report, but it said consumption is in a fully enclosed indoor facility. However, Tico's, like several places in Marina, because of COVID, uses a tent out of doors, are they only allowed to serve in the interior, in the hard permanent facility, or can they serve out on what we would call the patio, which is their enclosed tent area?
Yeah, they can serve in the patio. It's considered an enclosed area as well.
Okay, I wanted to make sure because
yeah,
that's probably the primary seating right now.
right. And as long as they can keep that, they can serve there. I'm not sure how long those will stay, but for now, as long as those are still up, yeah.
And then one other, I almost forgot, one other question. The permit is for a conditional use permit for 1 year, correct? Isn't that what it said, that it's for 1 year renewable?
No.
I'm not sure I
So yeah, there's a
remembering correctly.
Yeah, there's a standard condition of approval in there. It's basically the same kind of condition that we put in any project. It basically says they have 1 year to start the use, to establish the use.
Start the use.
Basically, whenever they get approval from ABC, if this is approved, then they'd have a year basically to start selling beer and wine.
And they don't have to renew it then.
Right, they don't have to renew
Okay.
it. It's similar, like if a more normal reason for that condition is like if they're going to construct something, it would say you have to start construction within a year. So this is just sort of a similar condition, although it doesn't have as big of a threshold for them to hit that threshold. So basically, once they start selling beer and wine, it's a permanent
Okay,
use permit. Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Amadeo. Any other questions from commissioners?
Yes,
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Surinder Rana. The staff report says that there is no place of public assembly within 500 feet, but as I understand, there is a public library right across in the same parking lot. Is that not a place of public assembly?
Public assembly means like a place of worship, typically. So like a church or so a library would not be a place of public assembly.
Okay.
Right, or a a theater or something like that. But that is the library. That is not really a library. It's more of a kind of a bookshop, if you will.
Yeah, I don't believe it's public. Yeah. So thank you, Commissioner Rana. Yeah. Any other?
Great question, Commissioner Rana. I hadn't even thought of that myself. Any other questions from commissioners? I have a kind of a quick comment. It's not really a question, but I'll frame it in the form of a question. And this came up on the last conditional use permit that we looked at for this. There's that language in there that talks about undue concentration of crime, or I know I'm not saying exactly how the language is supposed to be worded, but I'm just kind of wondering what the process is for deciding that. Is that just something the police department handles? Is staff aware of what process they use? Because I think it's a good question, and I don't know that I'm saying I think it applies here, but I'm not convinced that the city, I'm not sure if there's a real process that can be reviewed to determine that. And so I'm just wondering what you can tell me about that.
Yeah, it's a good question / comment. So when that is triggered, we have to make additional findings. And those findings include that it's not going to be a public nuisance or an over-concentrate or the additional added use to this particular census tract is not going to contribute to any sort of nuisance or create an issue for the neighborhood. If it was not an area of undue concentration, we wouldn't have to make those findings. And so there's just additional findings to the use permit in that environment or in that regard. And for this particular one, as I stated, this is an area with a lot of restaurants. It's a pretty concentrated area with restaurants. So it's also in some ways it's more fair to grant it for them because there are already a lot of other restaurants that have that privilege to serve beer and wine, and so it helps them. I think it helps their business.
So if I may, I think, and I probably didn't word the question very well, but I guess what I'm asking is, what is the metric that determines whether that applies? Is it there's 20% more crimes in this census tract than others?
Yeah, so that one didn't apply the one about the crime. So it's that or the population size. So it's just for the number of people that live in that particular census tract, ABC comes up with a sort of a number of, you can have up to this many ABC licenses of any kind, or of any kind of on sale and any kind of off sale, or off on premise or on premise. So,
Right. And
So-
I know staff is saying that the crime issue doesn't apply, but, and I guess, I don't know if I'm wording my question right.
Yeah.
How do we determine it doesn't apply? So for example, let's say, in what cases would staff say that, yes, it actually is in an undue concentration of crime? Maybe that's a better way of framing it.
yeah, I mean, that's something the police chief would probably have to speak to. That's why every time we do these staff reports, we check in with the police chief, and just to see if there's any sort of issues like undue concentration of crime in the police chief or the police department's eyes. It's really their area of expertise. If they did feel like, let's say that this use was going to contribute to that, then they would have had a much different comment, and they would have provided feedback, maybe conditions of approval, something that they could add to it. So yeah, it's that. If it is an area of undue concentration of crime, that would be something that would be brought to us by the police department, since that's their.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had a direct conversation with the chief. And as soon as I said where it was, she said, we've never had any problems over there. She said, I have no concern about them serving beer and wine. So, that's coming directly from, Chief Nieto.
Great. And again, I'm not worried about that for this particular application, but if we look at additional applications in the future, I suspect you'll hear this question from me a lot. So maybe it's something we can continue to look at and see what the police's response to that question would be, right? Like, what is the metric?
And if that does arise, then you can do things like limit the hours of operation. There's all sorts of different conditions you can put onto the use permit that can limit that. With something like this, that they're not open very late and the impact is not very huge. But yeah, if we do come across another project that might have some of those issues, we can definitely go through that process of making sure we have the appropriate conditions to, or look at it in that lens. So yeah.
Great. Commissioner Amadeo, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, and it's I don't know if we'd call this a question, but in response to the question you were asking, the commission has been faced with those issues in the past, and the police commander, was the commander at the time, came and spoke to the commission about what their concerns were and what conditions needed to be put on that approval before we could approve the license. Because there are areas of the city where we not only have undue concentration, but there are other activities that are going on there that could create a problem. And they explained that to us at that time, that what their concerns were and how it could be appropriately addressed. So I know that would happen if it came forward and it was not just the undue concentration, which we're already dealing with, but why that would have a negative impact.
Right. And I directly asked the police chief at the director's meeting at the request of Nick, because he was writing the staff report, and she's like, no, we're fine. We have no issues. We've had no complaints, no calls, nothing over in that area. And so she said everything was fine.
And
No conditions.
may I ask another question?
Please.
It's related to this issue. In our core of Marina, we already, I think in every one of our sections that is considered the downtown vitalization area, we have an undue concentration because of the way we've matured as a city. And so am I correct to assume that if there was any business coming forward making a similar request, that would be included in the staff report if it was in that core of what will one day be our downtown?
That's correct. Yeah. So I looked at the whole city, and I think all of the built up areas that have commercial districts in them are definitely over the threshold. That's correct. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Commissioner Amadeo. Any other questions for staff? Not seeing any hands up. I think we can go out to the public then. I don't believe there's any applicant representative here tonight. Is that correct?
Yeah, I didn't see anyone on the attendees list.
Okay. So let's go ahead and open public comment and get any input from the public. If any member of the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your Zoom hand. You'll have up to 4 minutes to speak. Not seeing any hands up yet. I don't think anyone wants to speak on this item, but we'll just give it another couple seconds. And we will close public comment and come back to the commission for discussion and a possible motion. Any members of the commission like to provide discussion items or make a motion?
I'll make the motion that we approve the resolution as provided by staff, including conditions and findings.
I'll second it.
Motion by Commissioner Amadeo, seconded by Commissioner Walton. Any discussion on the motion before a roll call vote? Not seeing any hands. Let's go to a roll call vote, please.
All right. Chair McCarthy,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bilsker,
Yes.
Commissioner Amadeo,
Yes.
Commissioner Hur,
Yes.
Commissioner Rona,
Yes.
Commissioner Walton,
Yes.
and Commissioner Woodson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. That motion passes unanimously. All right, moving on to item 6B, vernal pond item. This is a coastal development permit for temporary installation of monitoring equipment. We are going to open a public hearing, take any testimony from the public, and consider adopting a resolution approving coastal development permit 2021-01 to allow the installation of surface water monitoring equipment and near surface groundwater piezometers at 5 vernal ponds: the Robin Drive Pond, Lock Padden Park, Marina Landing Pond, Lake Drive Pond, and Dunes Drive Pond for a period of 1 year. This is exempt from CEQA per Article 19, Section 15301, Class 1.
Thank you.
And I think, go ahead, Chrissy.
Oh, no, go ahead, Chair.
Speaking with staff before this meeting, I think what we thought we might do on this item is go directly to the applicant's presentation, given that they may also be able to best answer most of the questions that the commission may have. And then we can come back and ask questions of staff and the applicant.
I'll go ahead and introduce it, and then we'll go straight to the applicant, because I think it's actually better. I am not a scientist. So I think that having balanced hydrologics talk about what they're doing is going to be much better. But let me start my PowerPoint real quick.
Very quickly, I live close to, but I don't know if I'm within that circle of one of those monitoring stations. So I'm going to turn my video off, and Christy, if you can maybe check and see if
and Nancy, you don't have to.
Oh,
so Chair McCarthy has already checked in with our legal staff. This is not a development permit that would substantially have financial impacts to you. And Chair McCarthy was concerned about that as well. And I don't know if Chair McCarthy, you want to talk to the rest of the commission about what you learned from our city attorney.
Sure, absolutely. Am I unmuted? Yes. Thank you, Commissioner Amadeo and Ms. Hopper. Yeah, I live next to one of the ponds as well, so I expressed some concern on whether recusal would be appropriate. Of course, our local city attorney doesn't have the right to provide immunity. That only comes from the FPPC. But the advice that was given is that because there's no, financial gain, regardless of the decision that comes out of this, is that that the attorney thought that it wasn't necessary to recuse. So I'm choosing not to recuse. Of course, you would make your own decision.
Right. Yeah, that's up to you, Commissioner Amadeo.
Thank you. And no, I won't recuse myself. I would have only done it if I was required to.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
Commissioner Amadeo, for what it's worth, I actually measured, I think I know where you live, and I think you're farther than the 500 feet. And even for me, I'm pretty close. It's questionable whether I'm, actually right about 500 feet from the project site or not. So for whatever that's worth.
So I'll let you know, because there are 5 sites. When we were doing the perimeter, the 300 feet around them, it hit about almost 1,500 residents, which means we didn't have to send out actually individual, postcards or whatever. That's an awful lot of people. So it makes a lot of sense that, everybody take individually how you feel about it. If you don't feel that you can be unbiased, then you can recuse yourself. Okay, so let me just start really quickly. Mine is very short, because I think that our applicant is going to have a lot more. So what we're looking at right now is a resolution, and that's a coastal development permit to allow the installation of surface water monitoring equipment and near surface groundwater piezometers at 5 rental ponds in the city of Marina. So that's the Robin Drive Pond, Loch Padden Park, Marina Landing Park, Lake Drive Pond, and Dunes Drive Pond. And this would be for a period of 1 year. And the applicant is going to show you a lot more about this. So in the staff report and the resolution, in staff's opinion and in our evaluation, it meets all the standards that are required in the local coastal plan, and also meets all the standards in the general plan and in the zoning ordinance. And just so you all know, after this goes through planning commission, there is a 10-day appeal period to the to the city council. And then after that, simultaneously, we will send the decision of the planning commission to the coastal commission in a final local action notice. And there's also a 10-day appeal period as soon as they receive that. So that goes by certified mail. So that goes to the coastal commission. The city attorney has asked for an additional condition of approval, that all the data and the findings that come from Balanced Hydrologics, that come from their monitoring over the next year, shall be submitted to the city within 3 months of completion of the monitoring. And I did talk with Scott Brown. He's going to be talking to you today, and he's absolutely agreed to that. So our recommendation is to approve the coastal development permit subject to the standard and the special conditions. And so with that, I'd like to turn this over before questions, if you will, to Scott Brown. Scott, I will promote you to panelist. Let's see. Go ahead, you can unmute. And Scott, are you there?
Yep. Just took a second for my audio to connect. I assume everybody can hear me now.
That's fine. Are you able to share your screen?
Yes, I should be able to. Give me just a second.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. I will share this presentation here. And I believe you should be seeing the presentation screen at this point. Let me know if you're not. Great. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity to present and to consider this item today. Just a quick summary again of the proposed monitoring. We're looking to monitor surface and groundwater levels at 5 different ponds within the city. And that the intent is to document the ponding depths, the duration, throughout the wet season, and the elevations within the ponds relative to the very shallow and moderately shallow groundwater adjacent to the ponds or underneath the ponds. And essentially, we're looking to figure out the degree to which they're influenced by that groundwater, or conversely, or in addition to the amount of just simply surface water runoff that influences those. In terms of the driver for this work, Balance was hired by CalAm just over a year ago, as they were going through the Coastal Commission process. They had received some comments from Formation Environmental, looking to get some more information on to assess the groundwater dependency of these ponds. And so Balance was brought in to set up a monitoring program to provide that information and to move through the process and go ahead and implement that program. So we started that last year and worked through the process, and we're coming to you today for the approval to get that started. Just a quick summary of Balance Hydrologics work. I personally, I guess I didn't introduce myself, but my name's Scott Brown. I'm a principal hydrologist with Balance Hydrologics. Balance is a small firm located or based in Berkeley, but we also have an office in Santa Cruz. And we really specialize in surface water and near surface groundwater interaction projects throughout the Bay Area, streams, wetlands, ponds, and that sort of thing. And also the effect to which these features are influenced by land uses, changes, different dynamics in groundwater, and those sorts of items. The map on the right kind of shows the distribution of some of our projects directly in the Monterey Bay Area, and a couple of key projects that are similar to this work that I wanted to highlight. We did work on the Coastal Vernal Pond Management Plan update for Lock Padden. That was for the city of Marina back in 2009, 2011, approximately, where we did some monitoring in Lock Padden that's very similar to what we're proposing, kind of expanding on that there. We worked Carr Lake design development, another restoration that had groundwater, surface water interaction impacts over in Salinas. The Frog Pond Park Enhancement Plan, and that was a monitoring project for the Frog Pond wetlands management area in Seaside. And then we've also done some near surface groundwater and surface water monitoring adjacent to Carmel Lagoon for a managed recharge feasibility project in that area. So it's just to highlight that this isn't out of the ordinary monitoring. It's something that we do throughout the Bay Area for similar purposes. I guess, tearing off of that, I mentioned our prior work at Lock Padden in 2009. During that, we did install surface water monitoring, and we had one very shallow piezometer that we had installed in the park back then, as well as, as I already highlighted, numerous other locations around, throughout the Bay Area and the Central Coast. And the monitoring really is limited to a small footprint. Sometimes it can sound pretty intensive in terms, when we document the paths and stuff, but we really try and limit the disturbance and get access through already disturbed areas and that sort of thing, which I'll kind of highlight in later slides. I will just kind of give a summary of both the surface water and the groundwater monitoring efforts, just to kind of frame that. First, I'll cover the surface water. It would involve going out and securing basically a 2-inch diameter PVC pipe, typically near the deepest part of the pond. Would include a staff plate or a depth ruler, essentially, for visual calibration of the water level. And then the PVC would contain a data logger that would record near continuous record of water level, salinity, and water temperature as well. So we'll have one monitoring site for each pond, and then we'll try and get it out in the deepest part of the pond where it's feasible. Several of these are only 1 to 2 feet at their deepest. It's a little bit different for Loch Padden and the Marina Landing. Those are perennial ponds, and so we would be installing something along the edge, in a deeper part, but still right along the edge in that area. And we would anchor them either with fence posts or rebar pounded into the bed of the pond, or alternatively secure it to existing posts or pier footers where those are available. And I can kind of highlight that a little bit as well. Again, to try and minimize the disturbance where we can. It's secure to existing infrastructure there. Just as a visual representation, on the left, there's a site that we installed. We're monitoring a pond just across Highway 1 in Marina State Beach that we installed last January. And you can see the staff plate here. It's just secured to a board and a fence post there. On the right is actually a photo of the monitoring station in Loch Padden that we'd installed back in 2011. And this one is secured to an observation deck just right along the side of the observation deck there. This is a photo of the Robin Drive Pond, and this was taken from the cul-de-sac back in early August. You can see it's almost entirely dry. And there is an existing, I don't know if it's a fence post or something from a former monitoring effort in the middle of the pond. It's unclear, but to the extent that we can use something like that and just secure it there and not have to do anything else, we do that. Or, but it could look similar to things that are already out there. So. Switching to the groundwater monitoring, essentially we would look to drill 2 piezometers, which are essentially small monitoring wells, adjacent to each pond, looking at the near surface groundwater conditions. So we'd put one in at about 6 to 8 feet depth and another one at 30 feet depth. And it's really to track the direction of groundwater movement over the season. So if you have both of those in there, you can track whether the groundwater is basically coming from the surface, moving to the subsurface, or if there's actually water coming from the subsurface. In addition to that, it will help us identify whether or not there are any restrictive layers that are perching the water in the pond above the groundwater or not. So those are some of the key things that we'd be looking at for that. We're proposing to install the piezometers using a small geotechnical sampling rig and access via existing disturbed areas adjacent to the wetlands. And I'll go over that a little bit with some maps that I have. This is just an example of a couple of piezometers installed. Once installed, they have a pretty small footprint. It's maybe a foot in diameter. These we're going to do paired piezometers, so it will be a little bit bigger than this, or 2 basically side by side. But we're proposing to install them essentially flush with the ground, so that there's no stick up on those, and that will allow for continued mowing where that's taking place and that sort of thing. You can see on the right, this is a picture of one that's installed just along a road, and it's perfectly flush with the ground, just accessed and from the plate on top. I'll go really quickly just through the sites that we have proposed for monitoring. The first is a combination of the Robin Drive and Lake Drive ponds. For this one, because the ponds are so close together, we'd only need one set of piezometers. So we're proposing to put a set of piezometers between the two ponds and put monitoring equipment to monitor the surface water in Robin Drive Pond. The photo I showed before was kind of looking from this cul-de-sac out toward the middle here. And then another one in the Lake Drive Pond looks to us from the air photos anyway that the deepest part is probably over here. So we would be accessing that from the side of the pond there. I'll just say the white dashed arrows are representing the access route for the geotechnical rig to get in for the drilling. The yellow is just the walking route that we would do for the installation of the monitoring of the surface water monitoring equipment, as well as kind of the routine access over the course of the year for downloading and taking additional measurements and calibrating and that sort of thing. I'll note that this location here, this is an existing right-of-way into the area. It looks like right down in this area, there's a stormwater inlet into the pond. And so I'm pretty sure that it looks like this is the stormwater pipe that comes over here from the cul-de-sac and out here. So we're accessing it via that existing corridor there. There is also access from this side of the pond, and you can kind of see this feature here. And right over here, there is some evidence that there's prior traffic through there as well. So there are two different options to get there, but it seems like this is the most direct access through there. This is a similar picture for Loch Padden. We're proposing to put the paired piezometers up in this location. When we talked to regional parks, they had suggested coming in from this side rather than coming in from the library side. Access was easier that way. So we'd basically be following an existing path. You can see a picture up here. The piezometers would be put in just kind of at the tree line behind the bench over there. And then the surface water monitoring equipment would be attached to, actually, I think this might be in the wrong location. I think the observation deck is actually here. So I haven't revised this one yet, but there is an existing observation deck that we would plan to attach the equipment to. The Marina landing site, this one we would access straight off the road. This is the road shoulder, and there's a dirt path that goes along the road here as well. We'd be looking to install the piezometer basically just on the other side of the path, and then the monitoring equipment in this area over here within the what seems to be the deepest part of the pond, or near the deepest part of the pond. We have also proposed to put a supplementary staff plate. So this wouldn't be this wouldn't be instrumented, but it would involve this. There's a culvert that comes through here, and there's another pond there. And so we'd proposing to put a staff plate in here for manual reading during the visits, so that we could compare water levels in these two features to see whether they're fluctuating the same, or whether they're operating independently. And that would help us determine whether they're tied to a common groundwater source, or whether there are other dynamics at play. And last, the Dunes Drive Pond. Now this pond is actually halfway on city property. That's inset here. This is city owned for this half on here, where we'd be. So the deepest part of the pond is actually closest to the road. So we'd be installing surface monitor equipment kind of down in this corner, and then the paired piezometers just off the edge of this driveway, which is an access drive to, I believe, a pump station for Marina Coast Water District. And with that, again, thank you for the opportunity to present here. We do request that you approve the CDP, adopt the proposed resolution findings and conditions of approval. And as Christy mentioned, I did speak with her earlier and about the additional condition of approval, and that we don't have any problems with that either. In addition to that, we would hope that we could get access to the sites prior to final approval by the Coastal Commission. Christy outlined kind of the several-week process that may be involved in getting this finalized and signed off by the Coastal Commission. If possible, we would like to access the site after the 10-day appeal window after this hearing, and to be able to do our reconnaissance, plan specific sites, and do some prep work in order to more quickly get the monitor equipment in once everything is fully approved, if it's fully approved. And so that would just help us get things in before things really start picking up in what will hopefully be a wet season. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. And with that, thank you again, and I will turn it back to Christy. If you have anything else that you need to present, or did you present all that you needed to?
That's why I turned it over to you, because
Okay.
I am not a scientist. So I wanted you to give all the good stuff to commission and the
Sure.
public.
Great. So thank you, Scott, for being here tonight. Thank you for the great presentation. If I can just ask that maybe if you're willing to stand by, I'm sure there's a lot of questions from commissioners and you know, for both staff and yourself, if you're willing to answer some of them.
I could certainly do that.
Excellent. Okay, going back to the commission, do any commissioners have questions on the presentation for either staff or Mr. Brown? Commissioner Amadeo.
Thank you, Chair McCarthy. My first question is, I have a couple, but my first one is you used a term called perching. It was also in the staff report. And when I looked up perching, it's talking about birds perching or a building perched on a cliff. And I knew that was not the correct answer. So if you could explain what perching is as it relates to this particular project, I would appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah. So from a groundwater sense, perching is basically when you're trapping water where you have like a thick clay layer. So as the water is infiltrating into the ground, it gets trapped. It can't infiltrate any further down there, and so you end up building water up on top of that because the infiltration rate slows. And if that builds up high enough, or if your restrictive layer is shallow enough, that perching can basically appear as surface water above. So it's basically a result of a restrictive layer that's catching water before it's able to infiltrate to the deeper groundwater aquifer underneath a site.
That's very helpful.
Yeah, and that can be a result of a variety of things. You know, geologic layers. It can be a result of old soils that get buried, and they tend to be more restrictive. And those are the kinds of things that we'll also be looking when we do the geotechnical boring for the piezometers to see if we see any physical evidence of that as well.
Okay, now across from the Marina landing pond is that other, I'm going to say wet area, because I'm not sure that it qualifies as an actual pond. I think it was inadvertently created through some grading that was done and then was stopped because there was some concern about development going on there. At any rate, that I believe is fenced in right now by the development of the hotel. So do you have to get permission from the hotel? Is that their land? Or was it just inadvertently fenced in because of the construction going on And our permission tonight will allow you to access that.
It was my understanding that was still on city property or city right of way along the roadway. Now
That's correct. That depression, if you will, is city property.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think he's still going to have to get permission in order to go on the site because
Yeah,
the
so
fence
so
there.
all of the city property will have an encroachment permit, and so the Balance Hydrologics will go through that process. Right.
Okay, great. And then my third question is sort of historical in nature because you're talking about you're hoping to get good rain, and we're in the midst of a drought. You might not get any significant rain, but we did have very significant rain. I believe it was in 94 or 95 where the peninsula became an island basically for about a week. Lock Padden Park Pond flooded onto Reservation Road. And, I don't think we're going to get that kind of rain over the next year, but there's always that chance that things change and you get something really significant, that 1 in 100 years accumulation of water. And will that impact, if we do get that kind of rain, your monitoring equipment, because it's designed to go into the deepest part of a pond? And we already know Loch Padden is probably the deepest pond in our area. It's well beyond the 1 to 2 feet. And if it reached the level of Reservation Road, would that create a problem for your analysis?
It wouldn't. I mean, in terms of the equipment itself, it's fully self-contained to be submersible, and they're submersible up to 12 to 15 feet. Where they're recording, actually, they're not going to be damaged by more than that, but they can record at least the ones that we're using within that range. So certainly no damage to the equipment. In terms of how that would affect the analysis, I think that would, if we had a banner year like that, I think that could only improve our understanding, because that would just give us a better sense for the full range. Because even if it does flood, if it does, get super deep, we get a ton of rain, it's still going to dry out next summer. Maybe not as much as it did this year. But we're still going to get that bracket of conditions from high to low.
And you'll be able to tell how much is water coming up from the ground and how much of it is actually surface water.
Yes. And part of the reason why we've included data loggers that record salinity as well is that's one of the factors that will help us kind of determine, rainwater is very fresh, very low salinity. The underlying groundwater tends to be higher salinity. And so as that changes over the course of the season, you can get a sense for how much is surface water contribution when the groundwater contribution is, as well as the differences between the shallow and deeper piezometers.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Amadeo. Commissioner Woodson.
All right. Thanks. So I appreciate the briefing, and I appreciate the fact that a little in the background that we know that it is kind of an offshoot of the client, which is Formation Environmental, since I didn't really catch that in the documents. My kind of questions that I have circle around kind of the bigger picture of why we're doing this. And knowing that Formation Environmental was the city's vendor for creating the MGSA and working on our GSP the last 3 years. I don't know if this goes to staff or to you all doing the work. Just trying to understand the basis for creating this right now. Is this kind of an add-on to the additional work that was revalidated in 2019 and 2020 to finalize the GSP that we had?
No, Commissioner Woodson, this has nothing to do with that. So what the charge of the Planning Commission is right now is to look at the merits of the project, the coastal development permit, barring any other outside things that are going on. So you're looking at, does this meet the findings that are required for a coastal development permit per our local coastal program, our zoning ordinance, and our general plan. We
Well,
cannot
we're-
bring politics into this at all.
wasn't
There's
being-
not
All right, so
nothing.
I honestly wasn't bringing politics. Actually, I was trying to understand, Christy, where the requirement for this is coming from in the first place. And
Oh, okay.
if-
I'm sorry. I'm
if-
sorry. I
and
didn't
if-
understand.
And if the presentation in slide 2 specifically said that they are partnered and their client is Formation Environmental, and if Formation, the only time I know where Formation Environmental in our history of the city has been tied to the GSP over the last 3 years, then I'm just trying to understand why this is even coming up in the first place as a project and as something we want to monitor. Because if it's not being driven by the city of Marina, then where is it being driven from? I mean, that's my base question.
So it is a, so when the city gets and this is an application that came in to do the monitoring in our vernal ponds within the city of Marina. And in 4 instances, it's city of Marina, and then we have also the park district. So we react to that application that comes in. So the requirement for a coastal development permit is because by doing any type of potential even ground disturbance within the coastal zone, a coastal development permit is required. And that's in our local coastal program. And that's why that was required. Scott and I went kind of back and forth a little bit about this, and you know, we came to the point where, look, we need to make sure that the public is really aware of what's happening and what's happening with this project, which is really benign, but it is required by our coastal program. Does that answer your question, Glenn? So
I guess that so the driver is the coastal permit, and this is a requirement of the coastal permit from Marina. I guess
So
So
what it
can I-
what it is our so when the city became a when we basically took over being able to do coastal permits, it's much more restrictive on us on what we can do and what we can't do. And so if there's any potential that there would be damage to the vernal ponds or ESHA, the special habitat areas or anything like that, we're on the hook for that. And so we still have follow-up that we do with Coastal Commission after we issue coastal development permits. So we're being entrusted by the California Coastal Commission to do the right thing when we have our certified local coastal program. Does that make sense?
I completely understand that, and I don't have
Yeah.
a problem with the work itself. Mine is just understanding the history of how we got this here. I understand it's affecting it's going into a wetland because that's what a vernal pond
Woodson,
is.
I think Mr. Brown kind of wants to answer your question, so I'd like to offer him an opportunity
Go
to
ahead,
do
Scott.
that.
Yeah, I think so. I mentioned Formation, so they're not our clients. So Formation provided comments on the Coastal Commission application by CalAm related and wanted additional information on these ponds for the additional analyses. So we were hired by CalAm to put together this monitoring program and provide that additional information. So I don't know if that helps clear. This wasn't triggered by the GDP or sorry the groundwater plan. Yeah, the GSP. Sorry.
And
okay,
Commissioner Woodson, I'd like to interrupt. I know we're kind of still in the question phase. So I don't want to get too much into comments, but given that I've been fairly involved in what's been going on with our groundwater, and I'm familiar that there was an NOI, a Notice of Incomplete Application from the Coastal Commission to CalAm, where the Coastal Commission specifically asked CalAm to go and do this monitoring. And so I'm assuming, and I don't know if staff or Mr. Brown wants to comment on this, but I'm assuming this is a direct consequence of that request from the Coastal Commission to CalAm. And I can read it to you if you'd like. It says, well, I'll just read the last sentence. It says, while not required to complete your application, we would be interested in discussing with you whether CalAm intends to conduct additional data collection and or analyses to further characterize potential effects and what any additional data collection would entail.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that was based on the comments from Formation, the review of the groundwater analyses and associated with the Coastal Commission permit back late last summer. And so that's where, you know, Formation provided comments as part of that process. And as follow-up, we were hired at that point to put together the monitoring plan and to provide that additional information.
Thank you. Commissioner Woodson, you have additional questions?
No, that's fine for now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Woodson. Commissioner Walton.
Okay, so hi. Basically, I had the same questions as Commissioner Woodson. So I was going to clarify whether I'd heard that you were hired by CalAm to do this study, and I'm hearing that is correct. So
correct.
So, and that was going to be my lead into why the study is needed. And now I have an additional question. Is it CalAm that's paying for the study, or is it the city of Marina?
CalAm is paying for the study.
CalAm's paying for the study. And then is the study is, then I think what I heard from Chair McCarthy is that this is with respect to CalAm's bid for that desalination plant, and we're looking to study what's going on with the rest of the groundwater throughout the city, specifically with respect to the ponds. Okay.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure I was understanding all of that correctly.
Yeah, the driver is to assess what the potential impact is, what the interaction of the ponds and the groundwater are, what the potential impact is, and if there is an impact, then to propose a mitigation measure to resolve that. So all of this would feed into that process.
I'm sorry, and my last question, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
then, and if you weren't doing this study, who would be, or would this, if you weren't doing this study, who else would CalAm have doing this study?
I suppose it could be, I mean, there are a number of firms that could be doing the work. So, I mean, it would be a similar firm to us doing that. I think we were brought in specifically because of our expertise in looking at surface water groundwater interaction. We're not a true groundwater firm. And so we bring a little bit of extra expertise in looking at groundwater dependent ecosystems, but also how groundwater affects the ecosystem within the surface water as well. So it's different from just a simple groundwater study. It really is a kind of integrated surface water, groundwater, taking it into concern, because if there is a change, what does that mean for the plant species? What does that mean for the habitat in the area? So there's some additional considerations there. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but that's at least our perspective of why we were brought in.
Thank you. It does. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Walton. I have a few questions before we go back to Commissioner Amadeo. First one for staff is just to have a good understanding how coastal development permits work. In theory, we could deny this. It could go to city council. They could deny it. And the Coastal Commission, who appears to be asking for this, would have the right to say, no, City of Marina, we're approving this. And that's the way that works. Is that correct?
Well, and I think, the city also, if at least maybe through formation, had also, as part of the process. I mean, so this was a concern that was brought up by the city through that process as well in formation. And so, this is an effort to try and provide that additional data to see what the potential impacts are.
Yeah, I think this a lot of this goes probably above a lot of our pay grade right now. There's other things that are going on that are unbeknownst to us. So I think that we need to focus on the coastal development permit and not the politics of what is happening with CalAm in the city.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to understand coastal development permits in general, even if it wasn't this water development, if it was anything in our coastal zone, if it can be appealed to the Coastal Commission and they can overturn a city's decision. Is that,
well, that's correct. So it depends upon where the project is located. If it's in what they call an appeal zone, which this would be, all of these would be an appeal zone. So here's what happens after, sorry, somebody turned the TV on. So what happens after this is that you would have the 10-day appeal period to the coastal or to the city council. Immediately after that 10-day appeal period, I file what is called a final local action notice that goes to the Coastal Commission. As soon as and that's via certified mail. Once the Coastal Commission receives that, there's a 10-day appeal period that, so say for example, it gets appealed to the city council. Then there's an appeal period. You go through that. The city council has their decision, and then they can appeal that to the Coastal Commission.
okay.
In addition, you can appeal directly from Planning Commission to Coastal Commission if the city charges a fee for an appeal of a coastal development permit decision.
Okay. My next question for Mr. Brown is the actual water level measurements that are going to be on fence posts or rebar. I assume that rebar fence post comes out after the study is done. And then the second part of that question is for the piezometer, that sounds like something that's a little bit more robust. My assumption is that 30 to 40 foot of PVC pipe stays into the ground in perpetuity. Is that?
Yes. So that would be, so if it's decommissioned at the end or decommissioned at the end of the monitoring, then that would be, that monitoring well would be closed per county standards for closure of a monitoring well. So it would be filled and sealed along those lines. Now, you can, destroy the top of it and restore the ground surface there, but the bulk of it would stay in place and sealed there. So it's a typical monitoring well installation enclosure. So.
Okay. And then another question is, you talked about if there was an extreme rain event, right? And how that might improve the quality of your data. What would you be willing to tell us about the things that concern you about degrading the quality of the data over the next 12 months if this is approved? What are some things that could happen where you think would impair the quality of the data that you're able to get?
The number one factor is usually vandalism. And that's not that it happens all the time, but that's if it's something vandalism. To be honest, cows are the second one, but that's not a factor here. Where we do monitoring in pastures, they can be pretty destructive. But so I think I don't know, the worst case scenario is correct, but probably the scenario in which we get the least amount of information is if it just didn't rain, incredibly low rainfall. If we got a drier year than this past year, that would potentially be from a data gathering standpoint, that would probably be the one thing. Even still, it's not like there's not going to be any rain. We're still going to get some. It's still going to fill up the ponds to some extent. It just may not. We may not get the kind of regional recharge to fill up the aquifer to really see what those dynamics are. So we'll still get some impact of, it'll obviously come into the ponds. We'll get some surface water expression. We'll be able to see how that moves. But if it is a really dry year, and by really dry, I mean drier than this past year, that would be the one thing that would probably cause the most confusion or allow or prevent us from really trying to pin this down.
Okay, and then final question before we go to Commissioner Amadeo, if I didn't already say that with my last question, but when you did the work in 2009, so we've heard that that we keep getting kind of conflicting results through these studies. And so I'm wondering, when you did the work in 2009, did you find any communication with the groundwater aquifer, or is that not what you were looking for at that point, or what can you tell us about that work?
We did. The piezometer that we installed in 2009 was only like 4 to 6 feet deep, so it was really very shallow. So we didn't have the deeper piezometer to pair with that, and so we did see a correlation between the groundwater, the very near surface groundwater adjacent to the pond, and the water level in the pond itself. But that study wasn't really geared to figure out the regional dynamics. And so the additional piece that we're looking at here is the deeper piezometer, so that we can see whether that groundwater is just kind of coming in locally and seeping in from the sides of the ponds and kind of migrating out, or from, in the case of Loch Padden, seeping in kind of in the park itself and then making its way to the pond, or if it's more of a regional groundwater, if it's tied to the regional deeper groundwater level. And so that's what we'd be looking at, adding the piece that we'd be adding here, in addition to kind of expanding the geographic reach by looking at the other ponds.
Okay, thank you for that color. Thank you for your patience, Commissioner Amadeo. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. My first question is regarding when we get to the point where we're making a motion, because I've heard a lot of concern that's very political regarding CalAm and the groundwater sustainability agreement, I think is what it's called, at any rate. And I know that as commissioners, we are not supposed to have political considerations. We are supposed to be looking at this purely from, does this meet certain criteria for a coastal development permit? And I'm asking Christy, number one, am I correct about that? And if the commission wanted to vote against approving this, don't we have to show findings that that provide information as to why this does not meet the requirements of a coastal development permit? So those two questions are for Christy, and then I have one more.
Yeah, and yes, thank you, Commissioner Amadeo. You are correct. This is not political. This is all about the law that we are working under right now with our local coastal plan, and the criteria for issuing coastal development permits. So hopefully everybody can keep the political out of it and look at it's the law that you're implementing. And then did I answer your other question, or?
Oh, the findings part. In other words, if I asked if this commission wanted to vote no on this, don't we have to provide findings that are
Yes.
consistent with turning down a coastal development permit?
That's correct. And so
Okay.
the findings are located in the draft resolution that you
Right.
have. I didn't want to waste paper for people that wanted paper. So it's in the resolution, your findings. And yeah, we would need to make findings.
Okay, that I wanted to make sure that that was understood because that was my understanding, but I wanted to make sure I was correct. Then my other question is for Mr. Brown. Is it Mr. or Dr. Brown?
It's Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown, thank you.
Yes.
Because you talked about the weather influences on your data collection, whether it's a really rainy year, an average year, or worse than the last drought year. So do you work with NOAA at all to learn about long-term, to find out what long-term weather indicators are for our coming years, so that if it looks like we're going to have another really bad drought year, that will not give you overall accurate information, can you delay this for the next rainy season based on that? Do you include in your report that you didn't gather enough information because of an extreme drought? I'd like to know how you handle that, and if NOAA is able to help you in that respect.
I mean, we certainly keep tabs on kind of the long-term forecasts. For our purposes, a lot of it is driven by kind of the storm-to-storm basis. So it's less dependent on kind of the season, the full seasonal impacts, especially for this. We're looking at kind of individual pond dynamics. And really, I mentioned kind of the dry year and the potential issues with that. It's not that we wouldn't be able to get good data. I mean, in this case, any data is more than what we have currently. And it's just, that would be the scenario in which we might not be able to draw the conclusions as much. In terms of, in that case, if that's possible, or if that, seems to be the case and something happens, then the more appropriate would be to extend the monitoring for a year, rather than we really couldn't forecast at this point, when we need to decide to put it in, whether or not we'd be able to get good data. And so, and in some cases, having a dry year and a potential wet year after that just gives us more information. So I don't, we're not planning to do that. I think one season would be sufficient to make some really good findings. But really, the largest effort really is in the installation of the equipment. And it does require kind of routine access afterwards. All of that is on foot. And the biggest disturbance, to the extent that there is in the actual installation. So once it's in, the effort to extend that, to provide some additional information. And then, the potential for kind of using that for any mitigation that's required as part of that as well.
Okay, that brought me to another question for staff. So if your data did not seem substantial enough to give the kind of report you'd want to, and you wanted to extend for a year, my question to staff: would this come back to Planning Commission for a new coastal development permit, an extension of the coastal development permit, or would it be done administratively by staff?
It really kind of depends upon what's happening. I'm not sure that I can be 100% definitive on that, but I think that if we needed to have, the CalAm, so the client and of course our city administration are going to be going back and forth for a while on this. I would imagine it likely will be administrative to extend it.
Okay, thank you.
There are procedures in our local coastal program for administrative approvals, and we can follow that.
Thank you, Commissioner Amadeo. Thank you, Christy. Any other questions from commissioners before we go out to the public? I'm not seeing any hands.
Sorry to jump in. If nobody, I did have one other thing to add. I looked at, I wanted to go back to kind of make sure that everything was clear on the formation, the involvement of formation and everything. So I went back to the report. And that report's actually addressed to the city manager, the Marina city manager, as part of the Coastal Commission process. But those were comments from formation via the Marina city manager provided to Coastal Commission on that was driving this. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any other questions from commissioners before we go to public comment? Okay, let's go ahead and open up public comment, and then we will come back to the commission. Mr. Brown, if you don't mind just standing by, and perhaps after public comment, there may be a few more lingering questions, perhaps not, but if you don't mind standing by, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure thing.
Thank you. All right, we will now open up public comment. If any member of the public would like to address the commission, please raise your Zoom hand. You will have up to 4 minutes to do so. And we'll give the public a couple seconds here. I see Kathy Biala has her hand up. We will get her to panelist and unmute her. All right. Kathy, you should be unmuted. Please go ahead. You have up to 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's very special that we have an expert like Mr. Brown. We don't often get that, to have some dialogue about these issues. I wanted to make sure that I'm real clear in terms of what the sources of vernal ponds could be. And so just listening to the conversation, I'm sorry, let me just close this door here. It seems like there's many sources you've mentioned, from the ocean, from rain, from a perched water, and then the groundwater, and I'm presuming you mean aquifers by that. So it could be any of these things that fill the ponds, and maybe even ponds have different sources themselves. And I wanted to find out if some can be predominantly fed by one source and another pond from a totally different source. And your study, it will presumably help us understand what these sources of water are for each one of the vernal ponds. So if you could just let me know if that's sort of the goal of your monitoring, and whether you're measuring the fluctuations and whatever else you do in these studies, that you'll be able to have those answers.
Thank you, Kathy Biala. Is that the end of your public comment?
Let's see. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. And we'll answer all the questions at the end of public comment here. Is any other member of the public like to address the commission? Please raise your Zoom hand. I'm not seeing any hands, but we'll just give it another few seconds to make sure nobody is doesn't have regrets. Okay. Not seeing any hands, we will close public comment. We'll bring it back to the commission. We'll go ahead and address Kathy Biala's questions. And I think they're really for Mr. Brown. And she asks, is the intent of the study, not the intent, but will the study yield sources of water for the vernal ponds? And she uses the example, could one vernal pond be fed by one source and another by a different source? And the second part of her question is kind of just reiterates, will the study identify sources of water for specific vernal ponds?
Thank you, Kathy, for your question. You're correct that there are a variety of sources that could be and that are contributing to these ponds. We know in some cases that there are storm drains, as I mentioned, that feed directly into some of the ponds. Others are a little bit less directly influenced by stormwater runoff. And so part of the rationale for providing monitoring at all of the ponds is to assess whether these are acting similarly or whether there's a big difference between ponds. I mean, we already know that 2 of the ponds are perennial, and the others pretty much aren't. And so there are certainly some differences there. And even in our prior Lock Padden study, I mentioned the shallow groundwater contribution there, but we also were able to kind of parse out the surface water contribution as well, because that one also has some direct surface water contributions to it. So that is exactly the kind of thing that we're looking to provide. And in these kind of settings, it's never one thing or another. It's always a combination, but you're looking for primary influences and the potential for conditions, varying conditions to affect the ponds and how that might play out. So hopefully that answers your question there.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Okay, and with that, we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and additional questions. Do any commissioners would like to start some discussion on this, on what you've heard so far from the public and from Mr. Brown and from staff and the staff report? I'm not seeing any hands, so I'll start us off. This is obviously a touchy subject. We all know that, kind of there's some things at stake here that affect our city in a very big way. And, if you live in Marina, you're probably, at least on the surface, no pun intended, aware of kind of what's going on. I personally feel like our vernal ponds are being held hostage for politics, and that's upsetting, if not frustrating for me. But it is what it is. And I do think that good science, and I do think that understanding what's going on here is very important. I do also think that regardless of what we decide tonight, that the Coastal Commission has indicated that they would like to see this data. And all of that given is why I'm likely to support the motion. But I have to say, I'm not excited about 3 or 4 40-foot PVC pipes being thrown into our ground and being left there to kind of stay forever. I mean, it's those kind of things that may seem inconsequential the most, but just, I think are bothersome. And oh, by the way, this may not be the last time someone comes to us and asks to drill, a monitoring well and therefore putting more casings and pipes into our ground. And so those are some of the things that kind of frustrate me. I wish that, it was a one and done. I wish there was one monitoring well that was drilled 10 years ago and that we could continue to use that to collect the best quality data that we could find. But, it doesn't seem to work that way. So, it's just some of the thoughts that I have. I see Commissioner Amadeo has her hand up. Please go ahead.
Yes. When you mentioned monitoring wells, we're talking about 5 monitoring wells. I have to say there are numerous monitoring wells throughout Marina because of the contamination of water from the former Fort Ord. And when I say numerous, there's probably over 100 monitoring wells. Some of them I'm sure have been plugged, closed off, the same way they're talking about doing this one. Cap it off, plug it up, but it's still, the apparatus that allowed access is still there. It's just the monitoring equipment goes away. So I'm not personally concerned about having 5 new monitoring wells because, like I said, there are so many. But the reason I believe in supporting this, and as most of you know, I was on the council for 8 years. I'm well aware of our relationship with Cal-Am and the peninsula as relates to water, is that every bit of information that is gathered is helpful to the city of Marina. The more information you have, the more tools you have as you go forward. Information is a great tool. So even though this is something that Cal-Am has hired them to do, Cal-Am was hired because their application was incomplete. And our city is going to receive all the same information, and we don't have to pay for it. So we benefit from the information we will receive. We can make better arguments with it. All of those political decisions we're all very concerned about, our council will be able to deal with, and they will have more information to do that. So for that reason, I would support staff's resolution with their findings, with the additional condition that it includes that the report also goes to the city of Marina, which was not included in the original resolution.
It sounds like when time is ready to make a motion that you're ready to do.
I will be very happy to do it.
Okay. Any other questions, discussion items? Commissioner Herr, followed by Commissioner Woodson.
Well, I should say mine is more of a comment. I mean, Mr. Brown, well, I mean, as a person who has done research in the past and still involved in research, you know, even now, I think this will be an interesting and also important study in, you know, once you got the findings and once we can apply, you know, what the findings say. I mean, especially in the state of California, where, you know, we are often, you know, dealing with droughts and how to resolve the situation. You know, once we have some idea of, you know, the geographical landscape formation, you know, whether, you know, where the groundwater is coming from or how much we get affected by seawater, I think we can apply those findings in developing other, you know, areas as well, whether it's coastal or whether it's land development. So, I mean, I just wanted to wish you best of luck, you know, in this endeavor. Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Herr. Commissioner Woodson?
Thanks. Two things. First, I am still even a little bit perturbed that the immediate question of asking who was behind this was seen as a political motivation. And whether it's clarification or however, the fact remains that up front, the packet was put together. It stated, this is why we're doing it. It was not the background of who was doing it. And then number two, in the presentation that was actually given today, it specifically cited a contractor that, and a background that was, if nothing else, at least a little bit deceptive. And I agree, and I like the transparency and the fact that this came out that it was Cal-Am behind it. And I don't have a problem with Cal-Am providing this. And I don't necessarily have a problem with studying the groundwater and the surface interface, because I think that that's important. And my background in hydrology, since that was my degree and what I spent the first half of my career doing, I get that. But it is a little bit frustrating that the immediate reaction of asking about it was, this is political, and this is why it's there. The second part of it comes back to the data, and this would be a friendly amendment that I would like to make on the reports, is I don't necessarily want the report data. I want the report. The report data is nice. I actually want the raw data, because the report data is the finalized, massaged, and that's information. What I would like to see is actually the full data package, because then we know that we are getting the exact same information. I mean, so if we get the data as is planned as information, or we ask for the whole thing and then we can do with it what we want. Otherwise, that's all I have. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Woodson. And I just would like to kind of, I guess, add some additional comments to your I think your questions were good, right? And I think that, you know, if someone comes in and wants to drill a well for oil, there's a difference between understanding whether that person wants to drill because they don't want the oil contaminating our vernal ponds, and it's ExxonMobil, right? And they want to extract that and put a big oil rig in our backyard. So I understand it's a touchy subject, and I appreciate your questions, and I think I understand where your questions were coming from. Yeah, so just a comment from me. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? I'll let Commissioner Amadeo make a motion then and see if he can get a second.
Okay, I would make a motion to approve the resolution approving the coastal development permit with findings and conditions, including a condition that we are provided both the raw data that is received and their final report. I think it's important to have both.
I'll make these.
I heard a motion by Commissioner Amadeo, and I didn't hear who seconded.
I think it was Commissioner Bielsker.
Vice Chair Bielsker, excellent. Okay, any discussion on the motion? Just reading through some of my notes here before I ask for a roll call vote. I see Commissioner Woodson hands is still up. I don't know if that's from before or you have a new question or discussion item. Okay, his hand was lowered. Okay, I don't think I have any questions, and I'm not seeing any others from commissioners, so let's go for a roll call vote, please.
All right, can everyone hear me okay?
I can hear you.
All right. Chair McCarthy,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bielsker,
Yes.
Commissioner Amadeo,
Yes.
Commissioner Herr,
Yes.
Commissioner Rana,
Yes.
Commissioner Walton,
Yes.
and Commissioner Woodson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously. Congratulations, Mr. Brown, and we look forward to getting some good quality data, and hopefully it's data that has what I think is the shared goal from everybody, and that is to protect our environment. So
Thank you very much,
All right.
everyone. Appreciate it.
thank you. Moving on, item number 7 is action items. There's nothing listed. Same for number 8. Number 9, discussion items. Any discussion items from commissioners? I don't see any. I have a couple that I think would fall under this category. The first one is for staff. In the news recently, we've seen a couple articles about what the new Dunes shopping center development is kind of moving along. Is that something that we should expect to see in front of us soon, or is there anything you can tell us about that? You're muted, Christy.
We're still working through that right now, and whether or not there were several previous approvals that had happened. We're just trying to find a conformance review. So we'll get back to you on that.
Okay. And then second question is kind of procedural, kind of relevant to the item we just heard, but when somebody wants to appeal a decision such as the one we just heard, is that limited only to applicants, or, I mean, could any member of the public appeal our decision?
Any member of the anyone can appeal a decision. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion items from commissioners? Not seeing any hands. We'll go to commissioner comments and staff informational reports, number 10. And if anybody can explain the difference kind of between items 9 and 10 to me, I'd really appreciate it.
We may want to go and revisit our agenda. It's kind of lengthy, isn't it?
Yeah. It seems like there's some items that we almost never touch on. So
that's true.
Such as number 11, correspondence. Any correspondence that to share with us? And if not, we will be adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Thanks for joining tonight.
Thank